Here's an ERD that I up with, but it doesn't mean that yours is wrong. I'll show you how I thought through it. First of all, of course, I had movies as its an entity, and I did decide that the title and the release date were attributes that definitely fit with this entity. And I knew from first normal form, the definition there, that genre and the features and the actors needed to be separate entities because there's multiple values possible for each of these movies. But what about the studio and the media type and the ratings and the price? So let's look at those. Here's, of course, where you would need to go ask the owners of the system exactly what output that they would need from the system to know then exactly what we're going to need to design into the system. We're going to need to make some assumptions here because we can't ask. Of course, studio could be a separate entity. It is a real world object that we can model. But in our case, we only have one value for each movie. But if we find that if we find that there will only ever be one studio per movie, and we won't ever need to have any more information about the studio, like its address, location, then it might be okay to leave it as an attribute of movie. So have it be an attribute in here. But if you decide you could possibly have maybe more than one studio per movie, or in the future you might want to include more information about the studio, or they might also want to include studios that aren't even related to a movie yet in their database, then it would be wise to make studio its own entity, like I did here. I'm going to assume that they needed, those that needed the database might need studio as a separate entity, but that there is only one studio per movie as is shown in our data up here. So I'm going to assume a relationship with the mini part being on movies, and that the studio could make mini movies, but each movie will only ever have one studio. So here is what a table would look like with data. So we can see here that we might have the foreign key of maybe the studio Pixar here repeated multiple times in the mini part of the table of movie. So it looks something like that. All right, let's look at the media type. So there's only ever one media type listed per movie here in our data. But could each of those movies be offered in other media types? Yes. So I'm going to make the assumption that each movie could be a DVD, it could be a Blu-ray, it could be digital streaming, and each media type, for example, DVD, can be the media for a lot of different movies. For example, many movies are available in DVD. So I'm going to make the media type table a many-to-many relationship with the movies. So we got a linking table to resolve that many-to-many down here. And we'll talk about the attributes there in a minute. The actors and the genre and the features. Let's look at those because they're very similar to what we just did with the movie and the media type. So an actor can be in many movies, and a movie can have many actors in it. So I have a movie cast here, linking table. The movie can belong to many different genres, and a genre can be used in many different movies. A movie can have many different features, and each feature can be in many different movies. So now, where would that price fit in? Let's assume that the price is like the manufacturer's release price, the price that's printed on the media. the manufactured list price. If we put price in the movie table itself, we're saying that the movie is always that price. And that doesn't really make sense because it really does depend on if it's a price in the theater, a price on DVD, a price of the movie with Blu-ray, downloaded, VHS, etc. If we put price in the media type here, we're saying that all DVDs are $19.95 and all Blu-rays are going to be $29.95, no matter what the movie is. And is this true? No. So where would the price go? It's going to depend on the movie and what the media type is. So it does belong in the linking table with the composite primary key. So here's a good example of second normal form, which states all non-key attributes must rely on both parts of the primary key to belong to that entity. The non-key attribute is price, because it's not part of the composite key. And does it rely on not only what media type it is, but also what movie it is as well? Yes. So it does belong and it passes second normal form. So let's take a look at what that would look like with data. Here we can see Empire Strikes Back is offered in both Blu-ray and DVD, and the price depends on the movie and the media type. For example, Empire Strikes Back in DVD, so this one right here, is $19.95. Empire Strikes Back in Blu-ray is $29.99. Okay, what about the rating? So let's look at that one. Okay, so rating could have some assumptions made here. Can't a lot of movies have the same rating, and then each movie has one rating? So could this be a lookup table? Should we have brought rating out into its own lookout table? I would argue no, unless I needed more information about that rating, like maybe the description of what G or PG actually means. I would not make it its own entity unless I needed something like that. If I leave it as an attribute of movie, but then later decide I wanted to describe what each one of those meant, so I wanted to say G was for general audience and PG was for parental guidance, etc. Why couldn't I just then add that attribute to the movie entity as well? So it would look something like this. This would not work because now we're not in third normal form, which states that each non-key attribute has to relate to only the primary key or rely on that primary key. As we go through the attributes that are not the primary key, let's see how this works with third normal form. Does the title of the movie depend on that primary key? Will that always go with that primary key? Yes, the primary key will only ever represent that movie. Will the release date always go with that movie and primary key? Yes. Will the rating always go with that movie or primary key? And I would say yes. Now look at the rating description. Does that rely or always go with just that movie? And at this point, I would say no. What it relies on is the actual rating itself. So we can see that it does not belong in the entity of movie in order to be in third normal form. We would then need to take both the rating and the description out and put them in their own entity and then relate them back to each movie if we wanted both of those. But in our case, we're just going to take out description because it wasn't in our data. We don't need it in our system. And so we for sure want to make sure, whoops, wrong one, that we take that part out in order to be back into third normal form. So I did have it how I thought it should be here with just the rating, no description in there. So yours could have been different, and that's just fine. This is just another example of how we might take some data, separate it out into entities, and make sure each entity has the proper attributes that go with